Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on this Thursday, October 12, 2023. We meet today to talk about BTC, to talk about FTX, to also talk about the minutes of the party in which we had indications, and above all, a processing of information which is totally different. You will see to what extent it is aberrant. We had a bearish breakout at the BTC level. We will explain why, we anticipated it, we gave the reasons, and above all, what will be interesting is to see the price reaction today and tomorrow, to know that we still have a lot of news. It starts right away. And I remind you that you have the educational course which is available for free, which is training of more than 60 hours, 130 videos, 400 pages of guides to teach you crypto, blockchain, trading, technical analysis, investment through videos, tests, everything to be able to progress. It's available for free if you have it financed by our partner. Everything is in description and comment. Without further ado, we start with our soap opera. Caroline Ellenson versus SBF in the SBF trial with more than 120 years behind bars. So something which is quite substantial, and we therefore have the former CEO of Alameda, Caroline Ellenson, who simply explains to us that they worked together to try to maintain the price of BTC at $20,000 by selling the funds, therefore the BTC present from FTX. So we are still in something that is strong enough to keep everything in a bearish position and taken by Alameda. That's a bit of the concept, that is to say that we put pressure on to be able to have opportunities subsequently for the trading company, which is that of Alameda, the one which is headed by Caroline Nielsen. So we still really have aberrations that are being revealed. We also have other things that have been brought up here by Johanna Luker, who do a very good job in their thread, in which we have all the little information. I invite you to look. It's really very well done, in which, when it was starting to escalate, she explained that they decided to tweet in response to CZ, regarding the fact that CZ was going to sell his FTTs at the time because he was going to get rid of them. And it is precisely this magnificent tweet which explained in all. In any case, if you want to sell, there's no problem. We'll buy everything at $22 in any case. And there she explains that it was a big bluff, because she knew that CZ was trying to harm FTX, because they no longer had liquidity at one point. They had more than $2 billion in liquidity to be able to continue to ensure the bank run, and there they did not feel good. As a reminder, in fact, when we go back a little, they explained that they had, of the $13 billion deposited by clients, which remained more than $3 or $4 billion. The rest was borrowed by Alameda, something which is totally aberrant and which shows us to what extent regulation does not necessarily play its role on this type of actor, but on the other hand, we try to play on other types of actors. We have the SEC, which is going after Barnbridge, a small DAO which takes care of a small protocol, really a small protocol which is not huge, and so they are in the process of an investigation into it. And what they carried out, and I really like this idea, is that the DAO opened a vote saying, do you want us to do everything to be able to enter into legislation in compliance with precisely the SEC to be able to move forward? The vote is still in progress, and there we really has the question of the definition of a DAO in relation to the SEC, to what extent the SEC will accept a form of DAO, and to what extent the decentralization of a DAO will precisely allow the non-application of the SEC, which is a bit like the bill which is still being voted on, which is still in the Assembly, which is delayed because at one point the Republican had left. We remind you, following the discussions and to the U.S. shutdowns, moreover, which will certainly resume. During November, we don't forget that. We continue by talking about the minute of the party that came out. Very interesting is that we still have two treatments of the data which are really different. One, we have a crypto site which explains that overall most of the participants think that we have reached our maximum and that we need to work more on the notion of temporality, of maintaining rates. While next door, we have the investing site which tells us that members favor a new increase according to the UFOMC minute. And there, we really have the opposite between the two elements. And that's why we can't take just one source to be able to work ideally, either analyze it ourselves or take 3, 4, 5, 6 sources to be able to have a clear idea. Clearly, when I read the Fed minutes, it's neither one nor the other. It's really between the two. That is to say, we has a split. We have a few positions which are on an increase of another 25 points. There is still the majority which remains on a stabilization of the price according to the different indicators. And yes, Clearly, I tend to think that we are going to be below the plateau. That is to say, we are at the plateau. I do not think that there will be an increase of 25 points. I think that it is an announcement effect. It is to say that we cannot say we stop increasing rates. So we are obliged to say that potentially we will continue to increase rates to maintain rates at this level, because otherwise, in fact, the market will potentially anticipate after the pivot, and therefore there will be an acceleration, and the market will go the opposite of what the Fed decides. In any case, the Fed for me, and in a form of plateau, we will certainly wait for Q1, Q2 for the pivot, and this is something that we have already anticipated for some time. Namely that the 5.5 level is something that I announced almost a year and a half ago. So we're really on target. Will we perhaps increase by 25 points? I don't see it yet. In agreement, the figures are rather positive, especially in terms of the economy. We have also seen a decrease in inflation, which is mainly linked here to oil. But we will have the answer in all cases today, 14:30, with the September CPI, to know that I think the September CPI will be identical to 3.6, or even perhaps still a little bit below, even if we had oil, which accelerated a little bit. In fact, during the entire September period, we had a first phase of acceleration in September then, after a very strong breathing which took place at the end of September, but above all, we were below the levels of last year, so at approximately the same level. So for me, we are approximately identical. I think that the rest has decreased, so we will certainly be on a inflation which will be controlled and which will validate this notion of plateau. What is interesting to see is that in terms of oil, we did not go for the retest. On the other hand, we went for the B6 gap. It was a long time ago. I explained to you that it was already strange that we hadn't gone to look for him. So either we really had a very strong breaking gap in which we would have had the acceleration. That was not the case. And there we are stagnating. Clearly, we were going to look for the gap at a given moment. It was strange that we hadn't already gone looking. That's it. It's done. It's validated. And now we're quietly going to retest the $81. $81, which for me is really the pivot point, which we will have to either really break underneath, structure underneath to say that we will potentially look for the $75 here and ideally set up a small range here. That would be the best solution. Namely that $80 is a bit of a mitigation point at the level of Europe in a potential recession, even if we are not necessarily very far from recession across Europe as a whole. Although there are a large number of countries, European, which is already in recession, but there, if we stay above it, it will be really complicated in terms of inflation, so we have to look below. And the fact that it's underneath too, what does that allow? That makes shale gas profitable, okay? Clearly this means that at the US level, we have an interest in selling shale gas and everything that is derived from that style, because the operating cost is more expensive than oil. But the fact of being in, the 80 actually makes shale gas roughly equivalent, okay? When we are below, that means that we do not necessarily have an interest in looking for energy from the Americans. On the other hand, if it is above 150, yes, we will have interest. So there, we really have a position in which we are comforted between the two, and which allows us to have, in fact, a world economy which would be more or less coherent. So this is really the key level. On the other hand, if we make a rebound and that we re-accelerate there, we have here a simple breathing in which we will retrace violently and eat ourselves at a big acceleration with a huge candle, and there we will look for the top to potentially look much higher, 105. So there we are, still relatively far given the impact of the Middle East, of the war in the Middle East. Well, I think that the impact in terms of oil is relatively weak. I think that the acceleration that we had is more pure speculation, and we are currently correcting for continuity of movement to be confirmed in the coming days. The S&P 500 continues slowly, quietly, its little path to get the retest. I think that this is really the key level, 4,232, and we have a second key level, which could go up to 4,461. So overall, we have this zone there. For me, we could have a wick before making a bearish continuity, because we still have here a pattern, which is bearish, okay, to have the breakout. This implied that we should look above the 4,565 to consolidate below and then leave there again. We will have a shift for bullish continuity. We are not there yet, although in the general trend, if we take a step back, we are still very bullish. We are rather in the process of retesting a key level here. I tend to tell you that for me, the key level would be more in the 4,100, which is a bit like my target that I've been waiting for some time. But we're not there. Not yet. We are in a classic retracement phase to either have a bearish continuity or to have a break. The break, for me, would be really decisive. It would mean that we would really potentially have a new ATH, which could arrive by the end of the year 2023 at the level of the SPF 500, and there we will certainly discuss it in a Saturday video. Not this Saturday, but certainly next weekend. Because there, it's another scenario that comes into account. I don't have it. Not yet. I don't see it yet. Clearly, I don't see it yet happening, but we still have to prepare for it. We never know. Especially since we have a dollar that is sinking. I think we are going to potentially get the 105. Clearly, what we are going to expect here, it is going to be a consolidation below, and that there we will have an effective retest. And there we will see, do we have a dollar, which goes back to the increase, especially that we have, if we take a step back. Also a skate, which is relatively bullish, and this break here that we were told that potentially here it was just a breather to have a dollar, which makes a bullish continuity. And so there, if we continue to take a little step back, obliged to pass in a month to take a step back, that would imply that we would look much higher and we would seek the top at 120, okay? So that means a dollar that would be very strong and strong enough to put pressure on the entire market. And so there we would have another perspective, also especially with an SP 500 which would accelerate upwards. At the BTC level, BTC we had a retracement. We are still heading towards this support to retest, which is rather classic. We always have this accumulation in SCAR STB spring when we are on the futures contract Bitcoin CME, therefore at the institutional level of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. And we see that we have a compression at the level of the RSI, so we are rather in something classic, and I think that we will soon really see something which will be of this style, a form of compression at the price level before having a burst either upwards or downwards depending on the news, and the news which will be endogenous. For what? Because we have an SP 500 which is growing, and we have here a BTC, a Bitcoin which is sinking, and which is sinking very strongly, in which we swallowed, yes, part of the candle. But we are well in this process in one day to have nevertheless had an acceleration. So we had a small return of volatility. We are not going to listen either. But when we look at the movement, we still had almost 3%, 3, 10, 3, 15, so we still have a movement which is relatively strong. It's been a long time since we had movement like that, especially bearish, in which we find ourselves a little in this approach here. And we swallowed part of the candle. We really accelerated after gaining liquidity from the level that we had given yesterday and the day before yesterday. And when we look a little at the movement, we see here that this movement was mainly carried by the BTC because we have a drop here in Ethereum against BTC, so that implies that we have BTC, which has fallen faster than Ethereum, and therefore behind it we have a bearish acceleration. So for me, it is really a movement that is pure BTC when you look in an hour to fully understand the movement that we had. I will just zoom out to show you that we are indeed in a big range here and there. We have had the reintegration of the range. So here we are indeed in a deviation implied here, bearish continuity to seek the bottom of the range, which is a bit equivalent to what we experienced here. Agree, at least that's exactly it. That's why this retest was really very important. First retest here, second retest here. So we has two entries to make a bearish continuity acceleration following rupture taking of liquidity, which is classic principle of a distribution, moreover, which is on bearish, and in which there we are in the process of looking for the top of the bottom of the range from below. We are really trying to reach that level. When we look, you will see that we have indeed had the downward acceleration. Below, we are going to retest this part. There. What we will have to see and determine is that on this key level, will we be able to consolidate above ZR, something like that? There we will have a signal to say, okay, well, at that moment, we are going to start rising again. And it was indeed a form of breathing with 3 steps to start rising again. If on the other hand, hop we break, we do that, we repack, and we break there. It's very clear that means we're going to look for the lower part 25 miles, so there we have the two scenarios. I tend to tell you that I am still a little bearish on this, although the level here is key. Okay, so for me we arrived where I expected on an increase in liquidity in this zone. There is an attempt at reintegration. We will see if the attempt at reintegration of the range works or not. I remind you that we are in a form of pure range analysis at the moment, because that is the case. We have no flow. We have no structure. Flow, so we have to take a step back from that. We are in a different form of trading compared to what we have experienced in the classic bear market or in the classic bull market. We are really in this structuring. Besides, what is interesting is that in fact we bought back the elements. I told you that if we broke bearish, it was going to be bought back at the level of the top traders. That is exactly what we see. We also see again at the level of the positions, and we see an increase in the open interest. So the open interest, on the other hand, it is an open interest which is mainly bearish. Although in any case we can clearly see that it is mainly bearish, the open interest and the redemption is carried out. So here we are rather in something classic, and this is where I told you if we ever saw a big increase, then for me it is not strong enough. I told you that we were going to exceed the 54. We went looking for 54.6. If we really want to have something notable, we would have to look a little higher up for 57. We really want to have something that stands out a little to say that we are going to leave again the rise. So there, in fact, we have a market decision that is being made. Classic, especially when we look at liquidity. We have created a lot of short liquids, so there is a real interest in do a short squeeze now. The question is it enough? Don't we look further down? When we look at the liquidity, we could say to ourselves, well, yes, it's still good like that. And what's more, it's being confirmed here by our friend CoinGlass with the heat map. Yes, I agree with you. But if we take a little step back, if we go during the week, give or take a few days, we will collect less, and you will see that we still have a lot of incentives to look for, and that overall the incentive that we saw there is relatively weak compared to what we see below 26,000. So there is also a real interest in blowing up these lows to get to the bottom of the range, and then to share out. I think that there is a decision that will be made, and we will have a structural shift that will take place, a bearish acceleration if we are ever rejected, with a very strong bearish acceleration, and then we will also have a movement which will be very strong to go and do this big short squeeze. The question is, are we going to blow that low? Clearly, if we blow up this low, it validates that we are indeed in a pure ranging approach here, that this element here is plus a classic impulse to reach the top of the range with a deviation above. On the other hand, if we manage to hold this low and we go looking above it, there we will have a potentially short-term, medium-term, bullish dynamic to seek higher targets. But at that moment, we will talk about it together. I hope you liked this video. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy, and speaking of comments, here you have the list. I invite you to pause. Cryptos, you have until 8-5 to tell me which one you want me to analyze. I will select the one which has the most comments, and there is no point in posting the same comment 4 times, of course, and I will therefore see you later for the analysis of the crypto you have chosen.